guys, welcome to the Parson series, and this is part 2 of chapter number 7. So last time we had seen some of the important DDs. Today we will be starting with the color blindness. You know, we get a lot of questions on the color blindness. It's an important concept. So the color blindness is your achromatopsia. It can be congenital or it can be acquired. First, we are going to deal with the acquired color blindness. Acquired may be partial, or this occurs as in cases of relative scotoma. It can be complete also. It can be anomaly, or it can be the anopia, as in diseases of the optic nerve. Now, one important thing that you should always think of whenever you are having color blindness, you should always think about the diseases of the optic nerve. See, your eyes see only what your mind knows. Similarly, you are able to uh, select the answer only when you have certain things already in your mind. So your mind should already know that if I am having a question or if I am having a case. Let's talk in respect of the cases as well, because as we are having a trend towards the clinical cases, the case scenarios, the idea is they want that you deal the question as if a patient is sitting in front of you. So if you start thinking in that respect, I think these question solving will become more interesting also for you. You are not tired, you are not burdened that I have to do 50 questions, 60 questions. You will feel pride that you are seeing 50 cases, you are seeing 60 cases, and you will be confident enough when you are there. You no matter you have done the clinical postings or not, you are already there with the clinical exposure. You have dealt with such problems, and you will feel more interested then when you are going to the wards actually. So you have to think about the diseases of the optic nerve. In most of the diseases of the retina and choroid, changes in the color perception affect mostly the blue end of the spectrum. So if I am talking about the diseases of the retina and choroid, they are mainly affecting the blue end. But per se optic nerve diseases, which is quite common for the color blindness, this is actually leading to the red and green color blindness. So which is actually most common also. So whenever they are talking about the red and green color blindness, always think about the diseases of the optic nerve. Okay. Now the slight diminution in the acuity of perception by these rays is also caused normally owing to the physical absorption. What is this physical absorption? There is increase in the amber pigment in the nucleus of the lens. So what is happening when we have got the nuclear cataract? There is lot of deposition of the pigments, due to which there was increase in the refractive index. It was causing the index myopia, that was causing the second sight. So due to the increase in this amber pigment, there is a lot of absorption of the blue end of the spectrum, and that is actually leading to the blue blindness. And this may be abnormally great in cases of the sclerosing lenses. Sclerosing lenses means when you have got hardest of the nuclear cataract, that is nuclear sclerosis. If you remember, we have got first grayish, then we have got light yellow, then you have got amber colored, then we have got cataracta brunescens, that is your brown one, and then we have got the cataracta nigra, that is your black one. So that is absorbing maximum one. It has been said to affect the paintings by the artists in their old age. So it is even affect the paintings, because there is so much of defect in seeing the colors that the person is not able to choose the proper colors for his paintings. Now we talk about the congenital color blindness. Congenital color blindness may occur in two chief forms, like again total and partial. And total one is very, very rare, and it is associated with nystagmus and a central scotoma. So I think they have given you two very, very important identifying features. First of all, the total color blindness is very, very rare, and if a question is kind to give you the total color blindness, always look for the nystagmus, always try to look for the central scotomas. All colors appear gray of different brightness. If you remember, I always say that when a child is born, whole of the world is like black and white for him. So he is able to see only colors of gray, white and black. So that is what they are saying, that if a person is having total color blindness, he is not able to see any of the color, just the gradients of the gray color. The spectrum appears as a gray band, like the normal scotopic spectrum seen with the maximum brightness. This is at 510 microns. It is probable that the total color blindness is caused by a central defect. So obviously, because colors are due to the cones, and cones are present in the center. If you remember, you have to remember this. C for center of the retina contains C for cones and C for your color vision. So if you remember this, so obviously if I have a problem with the cones, I won't be able to see any color. So I am expecting a central defect in those cases. All right. The partial form is seldom discovered unless we are doing certain special tests. Okay, since the subjects compensate for the defect by attention to the shade and the texture. So this is always there, that if a person has you know some kind of a defect in one of the senses, then that is actually compensated by any other kind of sense. So here also, if a person is having a color blindness, he cannot appreciate a color. This is compensated by paying more attention towards the shade, towards the texture. So, and along with the experience, like patient learns by experience that whatever he is seeing as a black is seen or is said by other people as blue. So he will learn that yes, my black is their blue if it is partial, combined with experience. Gross cases occurs in 3 to 4% of the males. It's very, very rare, 0.4% in females. Milder cases are more common in males. Now it is an inherited condition. It is X-linked recessive through the female who is usually unaffected. So carriers are the females who are unaffected, and probably due to the absence of one of the photopigments which should be present in the cones. In most of the cases, red and green colors are confused, so that the defect is a source of danger in certain occupations, engine drivers, sailors. I always say that, see, color blindness, till now we do not have any treatment. Why I'm saying till now? Because you don't know. Technology is going very fast, but up till now we do not have any technology by which we can correct this color blindness. So most of the people who are having the color blindness are having the red and green color blindness, and this leads to a very, very risky and dangerous condition, especially in those people who are having certain occupations related with the light, the engine drivers, the traffic police, the sailors who have to deal with the traffic lights which contains both red and green. So you have to be very, very careful there. Now these red and green cases again fall into two groups. We have got protenopes and deuteranopes. Uh, protenopes is the pehla. इसके लिए I always tell you that remember the Ram, Gopal and Verma. For this, always remember Ram, Gopal, Verma. So you have to go with this order. First is R, second is G, and then third is blue. So Ram is Pehla, red is Pehla. Pehla is Proto. Then green is Dusra, that is your Deutero, and blue is Tisra, that is Tritano. So when I am talking about the red end of the spectrum, then this is your Protenopia, right? And then what is happening? The red color is much less bright than that of the normal people and often actually shortened in deuteranopes. So if I'm talking about the deuteranopes, it is the green color. The green color sensation is pretty less, and that is defective. So if two colors are defective, these are called as the dichromatic vision. So if red is defective, then also person is left with two other colors. If the green is defective, then also person is left with two other colors. See, normal vision is trichromatic. So if my patient is having red color blindness, he will be having protoanomalous or protenopia, then he is having dichromatic vision. If my patient is having green color blindness, partial or total, then it is a deuteranomaly and the deuteranopia. Again, he will have two colors, that is your dichromatic vision. So he or she will be said that he or she is having the dichromatic vision. If the person is having two color blindness, so then he will be left with only one color vision, then that will be called as a monochromatic vision. So normal is trichromatic, then we can have dichromatic or monochromatic. In both the groups, the defects may not be complete. So if it's not complete, it is proto-anomalous, deutero-anomalous. Always remember, anomalous is an anomaly. Anomaly is just a defect, while anopia is the blindness, and that is your total one. It is clear theoretically that there might be other cases of color blindness due to the absence of the blue sensation, that will be called as the tritanopes. So protanopes, deuteranopes, tritanopes, right? Now we come to the word blindness. Now what is this word blindness? Word blindness is dyslexia. This occurs as not a very uncommon congenital anomaly due to the defects in the association areas of the brain, and it is often running in the families. 0.1% of primary school children being much more common in the boys and in girls. I hope you people have seen Tare Zameen Par, and there are Star has shown beautifully that how dyslexia can happen, and it's not very uncommon, and it runs in the families also. 0.1% of the school children, and much more common in boys. And in that movie only they said that maybe Abhishek Bachchan was also having the same in the childhood. So these are the things that should be taken care of, and not every child who is not very good at school, maybe maybe careless or not hardworking, maybe there are certain medical problems too. So owing to the backwardness in the learning to read, children are often brought to the ophthalmic surgeon. They are having a backwardness in the learning. So obviously if they can't see properly, they will not be interested in learning, and for that they are brought to the ophthalmic surgeons because a visual defect is suspected in spite of the normal fundus. So obviously the fundus will be normal acuity of the vision. Patients fail to recognize the printed and the written words. The auditory memory is unimpaired. The generally numerals and music can be read. The defect is not necessarily complete, and much improvement can be obtained by careful individual tuitions and perseverance. Acquired dyslexia is a part of aphasia episode, which is commonly found after a cerebrovascular accident. So actually it is not a visual defect per se, but because this defect leads to the impairment of reading and recognizing the printed material, the written word. So usually patient is first coming into the exposure of the ophthalmic surgeon. So I think every person who is dealing with the ophthalmology should know about it, and they should know that whom to refer to. And a very important thing and a part of it is the counseling also. Like we should know when to counsel the parents, how to counsel the parents, how to reassure them that their child is having some problem, and they should see the other persons. Okay, now we talk about the functional visual loss. So if you remember, I always say that ophthalmology is a branch which is actually integrated in itself. Like every medicine, when I'm saying medicine means whole of the medicine, I'm talking about the 19 subjects, so is related to the ophthalmology in one way or the other. And that is the beauty of ophthalmology. Like you cannot teach ophthalmology without talking about the other things, and the reverse is also true, vice versa, because every person who is dealing with the medicine in this world is talking about ophthalmology in one way or the other. So we are related with the medicine people also. We are also related with the psychiatric. So because we can have sometimes the what is called as a non-organic, that is your functional visual loss. So this can be either due to the willful blind behavior. So willful means that it can be malingering, or sometimes it is hysteria. Hysteria means subconscious expression of non-organic signs and symptoms due to the defective vision, but actually you do not get any organic cause for that. Differentiation of the two requires careful observation of the visual behavior, but is sometimes difficult, and help may be needed from the psychiatric experts. Now this happens especially in the cases of medico legal. So even forensic is related there. That patient is not able to see, fundus is normal, and when you are doing the other test, that is also coming normal. So we are like pretty confused sometimes that whether the patient is doing it consciously, that is maligneering, or it is just a part of hysteria. And we have to send sometimes the patient to the our psychiatric colleagues, and we explain them the case, and then we say that try to get out. Sometimes they have to claim the what you call it as insurance claims and all, and sometimes it can be like a case of crime, and they act like as if they are not able to see. So in those cases, like those people are taking this help of the ophthalmologist, and if we are confused sometimes, then we have to take the help of our psychiatric colleagues. Maligners are frequently involved with some form of financial gain that I was telling you, like insurance claim, financial compensation, employment benefits, request for the job transfer, early retirement, or in cases of children, this is very very common to avoid the examination. I still remember like कि बच्चे कहते हैं कि आज पेट में दर्द है, and moment you say कि अच्छा don't go to the school, and their पेट का दर्द is like गायब. So that kind of thing is also there. On the other hand, patients with the hysterical neuro-ophthalmic complaints have little or no insight of their infirmity, and may sometimes display a complete lack of concern over their incapacitating symptoms. That is called as the labile indifference, and at times it can be like they are not aware and they are not doing it consciously, but they are not able to see anything, and in spite of no organic pathology found. So that is also hysteria. Now, if you look at the clinical features, the most common presentation of the non-organic visual loss, of course, they are coming with the decreased visual acuity, and there is a constricted visual field. So it's not that just the patient is not able to read. The visual fields are also constricted, and that gives you a sense that there must be some problem with this patient. It's not only the malingering. Now, if I talk about the malingering per se, cases occasionally occur in the people who hope to gain some advantage by pretending to be visually defective. So obviously malingering is just for the gains. Now it can be monetary gains or any other gain which they are getting by pretending that they are visually defective. It is rare for the complete blindness to be assumed, and such cases can only be detected by constant watching of the person's behavior. When one eye is said to be blind, in spite of the absence of sufficient objective evidence to account for the condition, the demonstration of malingering resolves itself into a contest of wits between the surgeon and the individual. Now sometimes it is very easy to find out that it is malingering, but sometimes, you know, when the person is doing malingering only for the one eye and the other eye is able to see, then it may become difficult to find out whether or not this eye is able to see, because he can claim anything that he can see because other eye is working fine. So you have to, you know, struggle a bit at that moment. On clinical examination, no ocular or neuro-ophthalmic findings are detectable which can account for the symptoms, and if you check for the pupillary reactions, they will be normal. So obviously malingering had there is no organic cause, so pupillary reaction has to be normal. The subject should be observed when brought into the examination room. Eye movements have to be seen, and reaction to the surroundings. Now when you are actually examining a case of malingering, more than the patient's official examination, I think it is more important that you are observing the patient when he do not know actually that you are examining him, and look at the movements, because if person is not able to see from this eye, obviously he will not have a preference of this eye. Look at the behavior of the patient to the surroundings, if he's using both the eyes, if he's trying to preferably use this eye, and ocular movements also, because that is involuntary. So patient is moving the eye or not. The Meniere's reflex should be tried to see if the eye blinks. Then a very very important thing is what we do, suddenly we bring the something near the eye and the patient is able to see, obviously he or she will reflexly blink the eyes and close the eyes. So that is a very good way of finding out the patient's malingering. Meniere's reflex is pretty good there. And an attempt should be made to elicit the optokinetic nystagmus by rotating a optokinetic nystagmus tape in front of the patient, and the pattern of the visually evoked potential should be recorded. So I think this will form important things if they are asking you that what are the important steps that you can do for the malingering, a kind of integrated question, like an enhanced kind of a question where ophthalmology, neurology, psychiatry, forensic, so many things are involved, and you are assessing a case of malingering, then you can see the movements of the patient, look for the Meniere's reflex, you can do the optokinetic nystagmus drum test that can be there. It is to be noted, however, that a very patient may not attempt to fixate or look at the pattern, but it may fixate beyond the pattern stimuli, obliterating the P100 response and thus confusing the picture. Okay, so we can other thing that we can use is the fixation behavior, whether the patient is able to fixate with the help of that eye or not. So that is your P100 response, and if the patient is not able to fixate, then that can lead to confusing with the picture. Now let's see the differential diagnosis. This essentially includes the disorders which are presenting with the visual loss with a normal fundus. I think this is again very important. All these charts are pretty important, especially from a standard book like Parsons. So this will help you in easy solving of the questions. Whenever they are giving you certain questions related to this, you can just think of that flow chart, that table, that box, and quickly you can get the answer. So these are the conditions which are producing the visual loss, but they are having the normal fundus. So if you are having a question in which the person is having some visual loss but fundus is normal, so what are the things that you have to think for? So the first important thing is the amblyopia. May suddenly notice the poor vision. So if the patient is having the amblyopia, you will see that there is a poor vision in one eye. Sorry, there will be poor vision in one eye. Though the onset is in early childhood, it is important to identify the factor which has led to the amblyopia. What are the important factors that leads to amblyopia? Anisometropia, manifest squint, and microtropia. So if I am having the gross difference in the refractive errors of the two eye, if I am having a person who is having a squint or having the microtropia, so in these cases, if a person is having a visual defect along with the normal fundus, I should first think of amblyopia, that is the lazy eye. The second important thing is the cortical blindness. Cortical blindness must be ruled out by a detailed history, observation, examination. So obviously for the cortical blindness, you won't get any particular factor, but you have to take a careful history, any predisposing factor, any risk factor, any medical history, cerebrovascular accident, you have to do that. So it is usually the diagnosis of exclusion. Then the third is your retrobulbar neuritis. How can I forget the retrobulbar neuritis, which is a type of optic neuritis where we were having the sudden diminution of vision, the total diminution of vision, but with a normal fundus as in cases of retrobulbar neuritis. But important thing is definitely you are going to get a RAPD. So in the question, they will definitely give you RAPD and that will solve that question. Then the next is your the cone and rod dystrophy. Now if a person is having both the dystrophies, the rod dystrophy also and the cone dystrophy also, you will get a positive family history, photophobia because we do not have the cells, abnormal dark adaptation due to the absence of the rods, and abnormal ERG. So agar cones and rod are included, I think that is not a problem, because if you look at the A wave of the ERG, definitely you will get abnormal there because it is coming from the rods and cones. If you are having the retrobulbar neuritis, look for the RAPD. If you are having the cortical malingering, diagnosis of exclusion, amblyopia, you have to look for the amblyogenic factor. And then last but not the least is the chiasmal tumors. Sometimes the vision loss may also precede the optic atrophy, sluggish reaction to the light, pupillary reactions with the characteristic visual field defects. Again, the chiasmal tumors is not a problem because chiasma, if the lesion is having involving the optic chiasma, we will have a definite kind of visual field defect. You will have visual loss also because it is a part of the optic nerve, and it is also going to show the sluggish reaction to the light. All right. Many tests have been devised and several should be employed in each case. Now this is again a very important thing. What are the tests that we should do in such a case? Now let's see the tricks that we can apply for the patients. So what we can do, first of all, we can use a low concave or a convex glass. Okay, just 0.25 diopter. It is placed before the blind eye, and a high convex glass before the good eye, and the examinee is told to read the distant type. If he succeeds, maligneering is proved. So what you are going to do, where we have put a low concave or convex glass in one eye and a high convex in the other, and if still the person is able to read, obviously the maligneering is proved. So it's a very good idea. The second is that you are taking a prism. So we are taking the help of a prism here in the next case. So this prism is placed base downwards or outwards before the good eye, and the examinee is told to look at the light. Maligneering is proved if the patient admits to see the two lights. So if we are putting the prism and the base is outward, okay, before the good eye, and you ask the patient to look at the light. Obviously, if the patient is seeing two lights, why? Because one will be from the this affected eye and one is from the good eye, that is splitted. So what you have done, you have created the dissimilar images by putting the prism in front of the one eye. So I have created like dissimilar images which will not fuse, and obviously there will be diplopia. So if the person is seeing two images, that means the patient has vision. If the patient does not have vision, the person will see only this light, the prism one, and there will be no two images. Then what we can do the Worth 4-dot test, or the Snellen color types may be employed. The letters are printed in green and red. If a red glass is placed before the good eye, patient reads all the letters, the other eye is not blind. Okay, so the other method is that you can put a red glass in front of the good eye. Now, if I'm putting the red glass over the good eye, the patient should be able to see only the red letters. And if the patient says that he is reading all the letters, obviously the patient is not blind. Care must be taken in this test that the red glass cuts off all the rays from the green letters as tested by the surgeon's own vision. But yes, you have to take care that red glass is doing its work fine and it is cutting all the red light coming from the glass. So this was about the color vision, about the malingering, the cortical blindness, hysteria, some of the beautiful concepts which will, help you solving the integrated questions and clinical case scenarios in a more and more conceptual manner. And this will also help you in revising some of the concepts of ophthalmology that you must be reading in other subjects. So I hope you people are enjoying reading Parsons with me. Please, this is an honest request. Please, if you like the video, please do like and comment over the video, because I do get so many messages personally about the Parsons series, your feedback. I'm really happy, but it would be really appreciated if you like and um, sh share your feedback in the comment section of the video. It really motivates us, because it takes a really hard work and a lot of efforts to bring out these videos in front of you. And don't think that it does not matter. Every of your like, every of your comment do matters really great for me. And also do comment what are the other things that you like me to put forward in front of you. Another important thing is that you must have seen that video also. I am also planning to bring another series of ophthalmology at a glance in front of you. That is a small effort and a small video concept where I'm trying to bring the ophthalmology revision in the form of very, very small videos, so that it does not hamper much of your time. And just a few minutes watching these videos daily will help you solve one question from your ophthalmology. So I hope you will like it. Please do comment what are the topics of these small videos that you like me to prepare the video on. And do read uh, and remain safe and happy ophthalmology. Thank you.